Murder in the morning from the Hidden Killers podcast.
We are dissecting the trial of Jennifer Crumbley today. We're now going to take a look into the closing arguments that were made by Shannon Smith. This is the attorney for Jennifer Crumbley. Of course, Jennifer Crumbley, if you're just clicking on the audio of the podcast right now or watching us on YouTube, she's the mother of Ethan Crumbley, who has been charged with involuntary manslaughter and found guilty on all 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Her son executing 4 of his classmates at Oxford High School in 2021. It was very interesting to watch the trial in whole. The testimony given by Jennifer Crumbley, the testimony given by the school, and the arguments that were being made effectively or ineffectively, I guess, depending how you look at it, by her attorney, Shannon Smith. What was your reaction to Shannon Smith, Stacey?
I would not have wanted her as my attorney. I felt like she was a bit, well, I said to you off the air, a youper, which...
That means Upper Michigan. And for those, because most people even no, there's an Upper Michigan. They're like, Michigan is 2 parts? Yes.
It is.
It's the part that's attached to Wisconsin. Above the other part, there's like the mitten, and it's up there.
Yes.
So, yes, it's a part that connects to Canada. They call them...
Hey, let me finish this part before I get myself into big trouble. I don't have a problem with youpers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let that be known. I am from Minnesota. I live in Wisconsin. I have a lot of people in my life that are youpers, but it reminds, for those of you who don't know what that sounds like, it's like when we hear somebody from the South and we think they don't sound intelligent because they're Southern drawl.
Yes.
That's the way Midwesterners look at the youpers. And that was my first impression of her was, how long have you been doing this? And so I was judging her right away. I think this was such a landmark case.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel that she had the experience that it took to take this on.
I'm really kind of amazed for being as landmark of a case as it was that this was the attorney.
Correct.
I was, you could have had an attorney come in from all over the place. And the state of Michigan, there's, I'm sure, plenty of very well-qualified attorneys who would have taken this case up for the publicity. I don't know that anyone is going and knocking at the door of Shannon Smith now to represent them. I don't think it was necessarily a great representation, although I could be completely wrong. Bob Botta, who's a very good defense attorney, who's on with us all the time, he loved her. He's like, I think she's great. And he looks at things from a different perspective sometimes, and one with far more experience than I have in a courtroom. So I don't know if he found it like an endearingness to her or kind of a authenticity, which I can kind of see. He's in Chicago, so he's from, our original neck of the woods too. But I guess everybody kind of has a different opinion. I certainly think she tried her best. But again, I think that's where we kind of go back to what we talked about in earlier on the first segment of today of your best maybe should be better. Here's Jennifer Crumbley Shannon Smith fumbling through some of those initial closing arguments.
The other thing I have to ask you to keep in mind is that in the jury instructions, and I think you've been told this throughout trial, the defense does not have to prove or do anything. Like Judge Matthews said, we could sit at the table and play chess the whole time, call no witnesses, cross-examine no witnesses, provide no evidence, because we have no burden to prove a thing. However, in this case, you obviously saw the defense present Mrs. Crumbley, who took the stand, so that she could give you some context beyond parts of the evidence that were confusing when the prosecutor was introducing in bits and pieces. And the problem in this case is that we can all agree everything can be seen different in 2 ways. First of all, when you look back in hindsight with 20/20 vision, when you look back in hindsight, it is easy to say, this could have been different, that could have been different, this would have changed. And the other circumstance, the second one that makes a huge difference, is when you get full context around the evidence that is being used. And in this case, the prosecutor has cherry-picked little bits of evidence out of mountains of evidence to put in front of you with no context to explain what they're doing. And when you get cherry-picked bits of evidence, it's easy to reach wrong conclusions.
And aren't cherries delicious? I like to pick cherries. Cherries are good. Sometimes you get a bad cherry and they're not very tasty. Have you ever had a bad cherry? This is kind of how the closing arguments went. It continued on into very weird territory.
Cherries are a very Michigan thing, are they not?
100%. Most of your cherries in the United States come from Michigan, unless you're, getting some from another country. But yeah, it's just very, I guess, raw. I don't know another way to put it. Colloquial. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out. Here's more from her.
Now, when I took on this case pretty early on, I realized I am Jennifer Crumbley, and I could be here accused and sitting in her spot very easily. Now, in my house, we don't have guns. I don't have guns, but I do have children. And at the end of the day, they're good kids. I have a son that wants to hang out with me very rarely, but I have no belief that any of my 4 children would ever harm anyone else. And while I don't have a gun, I have a large butcher block on my counter with big knives that I use when I cook, and I enjoy cooking. And at the end of the day, my kids could just as easily grab a knife without me knowing it, and without me having it on my radar, and walk out the door of my house and go play with their kids, and my son could kill somebody with my butcher block knife.
They could, but wouldn't you feel pretty shitty if they had written to you, "Get me help," with a picture of your butcher block knife while you're cooking your Prego, that maybe you should have done something. Maybe there's a little more accountability there than just, you got knives in your kitchen, Miss Smith.
And that's where the disconnect comes from. The knife sitting on the counter can do some damage. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It's going to be more isolated damage. The car in your garage can do damage as well. Mm-hmm. Its main intent, though, is not to kill people.
Yeah.
The gun is very different. And I'm a gun owner. I've got 4. They're all locked up right now. Yeah. And I've got a concealed carry permit. I've never carried in my life, but I have it. Mm-hmm. But I know that gun, its main purpose is to protect my life by killing or maiming somebody else.
That's the only reason I have guns. And I don't hunt. I don't do anything, but they are in my safe and they are protected. And my kids do not have a chance to get their hands onto them. But should there ever be some reason, if there's a home invasion, I'm more so like, if we get into apocalyptic territory, we have massive civil unrest, pulling out that large gun may scare some people away. So that's why I have them. And yes, it's there. It is there to kill or scare human beings if my life or the lives of the ones I love are in danger. And that's it. Yeah. There's no other reason for it. I don't, it's not for fun. It just isn't. So it's a little bit different. And arguing that or the car or the this or the that somebody could use to kill, that gets to be kind of a convoluted argument where, it's one is for one thing, one is for the other. But what about if you're going to argue on this? Okay, we're going to go after, we found Jennifer Crumbley guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Do we then not have to, go after anything and any time that a child gets a weapon from a parent for involuntary manslaughter? How about gangs? How about Chicago? How about we go take a look at the 10, 20, 30 people a week that get murdered there with guns that were maybe taken out of the home, maybe belonged to dad or mom or, dad who hasn't ever been around, or whatever. And where do those, do we then start holding all of those parents accountable too? Parents who have children who are in gangs that go and commit violence. Do we go after them and say, why didn't you reel your kid in? Why did you allow them to go run the streets with your thugs I'll be waiting for you till you get home. I'll be waiting. That's a Tupac song. But why? Why we need to take a look at all that then if we're going to be doing this. It's not just going to be Michigan mom who had a gun that dad bought and the kid got there. We got to look at everything. And then do we also look at cases too where it's not just the kids? What about in the home where it's not a kid? It's you have an unstable family member, maybe a spouse, maybe it is an adult kid, an adult child, if you will, that's still living at home in the basement at 30 something, or whatever age, but they're not a kid anymore. And they go and commit a crime. And you knew they were kind of off their rocker or had some signs of mental illness that they didn't get help for, or you didn't help them get help for. Do we go after all those situations as well and say, well, you knew about this, why didn't you do anything? It's kind of like see something, say something, then do something. It really opens up the floodgates as far as who can be prosecuted now after this verdict. And I don't know that it's going to really solve much of anything. It's kind of like if you're going to drive through a thunderstorm with your lights off and your windshield wipers off, there's no DJ on the radio that's going to convince you to turn your lights on. You're a fucking idiot. And that's it. That's the long and short of it. We used to, in radio, we would get calls all the time when it's radio. Tell people to turn their lights on. I'm sorry, if you haven't figured that shit out yet, me saying it's not going to help you. Yeah.
And, as DJs, we sat there and begged people to turn on their lights, especially if it was foggy in daytime. And they wouldn't do it. And, you never know. You can give that warning all you want. If they haven't figured it out while they're driving based on the fact that they have a license and they've been told this many times, there's nothing we can do.
I don't know. I mean, we do know that penalties and things like that, like this, don't necessarily have much of an impact. If someone's going to be ignorant and irresponsible, they're probably going to be ignorant and irresponsible. They probably don't even know this case took place. Like they have no idea that this is even a thing. I don't know that it's going to change a lot unless it's really, really enforced. But again, at what point, how far do you go? Here's more from the court.
I also got text one day. We have no food in our house. I am absolutely starving. You are the worst mother ever. I ignored it. She was mad we didn't have the right kind of chicken ramen when we have 4 other flavors of ramen. And there's about 100 other things she can eat. And I knew she's not going to starve to death, but taken out of context, it makes me look like a neglectful mother. But if you know all the circumstances and the relationship I have with my daughter, I knew it was an overdramatic, stupid point. So when you see messages from Mrs. Crumbley's son saying, will you at least call back? Those are so out of context. And when I'm driving home from court every day, I'm getting messages, will you at least call back? And I don't, because I know what they want is for me to run through the McDonald's drive-thru and bring everyone a Coke.
She needs to reel it in. She needs to reel it in, because this is just like, okay, I love your personal stories here. And actually in courts, they don't like this. I'm kind of surprised the judge didn't tell her to shut up and say, yeah, this is nothing. Get back on track here. And this is just a small example of the 1 hour of her testimony or her closing arguments that were really kind of going out there.
And what's bothering me about this is, okay, yes, kids can be extremely dramatic, but this kid was drawing pictures of guns and shooting people and saying people have 1 day left to live. He spelled it out.
Yeah.
To me, that's different than you're just a horrible mom. We don't have anything to eat. We've all said that to our parents. But we also, if we said something like, I'm going to kill people, my parents would have snapped to attention.
Yeah.
As shitty as they were, they would have been like, whoa, okay, we've got a problem.
Yeah. Now, I agree. But she's doing her job. She really was. She was trying to kind of downplay this as like, this is just a mom who she gets shit from her kid. And how is she supposed to know what's the bigger red flag? The ramen or the picture of the gun and the dead student? How would she know? I don't know. Common sense at some point, taking a little bit of responsibility and taking your head out of the sand? I don't know. Here's more.
When Mrs. Crumbley did have to evaluate what's going on with her son, and there was something alarming happening, she relied on people who spend day in and day out with kids, people she considers to have more expertise in kids than she does, including Pam Fine, who left her a very nonchalant voicemail that you've heard, that was Exhibit 115 if you want to hear it again, saying Ethan was looking up bullets in school today. It's not illegal. It's not wrong. He's not in any trouble. It's just like how teachers can't look up hops for beer. You don't need to call me back. She was relying on the representations by the school counselor, Sean Hopkins, who took the stand and has had a lot of training, hundreds of hours of training, and made it very clear this was just an issue where he needed some kind of therapy and didn't think it was necessary to suggest to the Crumbleys, go to Common Ground today, or serious enough that he called 911. And the assistant dean said the same thing in the meeting with Mr. Hopkins, that Ethan Crumbley that the son could remain in school that day, that he would probably be better off, according to Mr. Hopkins, around peers versus being alone.
And that right there is, I think, some pretty damning evidence against the school. And I think one of the things that actually could have possibly gotten her off and may help her in appeals. This will ultimately be appealed. And I do wonder a little bit if the appeal is going to go on the argument of ineffective counsel.
Oh, it certainly couldn't it?
I think there's a lot of evidence to the point of that. I mean, like some of the cross, not even the cross, I felt like cross in some of Jennifer Crumbley's testimony on her own behalf, with her own defense questioning her, felt more like cross. Like you are making her say things that don't look very good.
Yeah.
That I think is a possible argument. That could be made. I think Jennifer Coffindaffer even made that argument on Twitter this week. Here's some more from the court.
Reasonable doubt can be found from the fact that Jennifer Crumbley did her best as a mother. While going to the shooting range is not her thing, she's trying to find a way to bond with her son, who has just had his best friend move away. She took him camping, took him on trips. She let him have pets. He has the cutest little kitten you've ever seen in these Facebook pictures. Board game nights with him. She's not neglecting him in any way. And if anything, she's going to the gun range for him, not because she enjoys it. You can tell how much she loves it when she gets up there, shoots a couple shots, and then just stands there letting him enjoy the activity he likes. But Mrs. Crumbley on that day is trying her best to bond with her child and have a relationship.
Kittens work for a lot of things.
Right. But not this, man.
Not this. Not trying to get someone off on murder charges or involuntary manslaughter charges. Like, you can distract a kid at an Applebee's with a kitten video. You can't necessarily distract a jury that's trying to figure out if mom should be accountable for her son executing 4 students. That just seems to be a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, this one's she's really pulling at strings here.
She also had this argument as she started to wrap up those closing arguments.
I find Jennifer Crumbley not guilty, not just for Jennifer Crumbley, but for every mother who's out there doing the best they can, who could easily be in her shoes, for every parent doing the best they can, who could easily be in their shoes, for every parent that has snippets of text messages that could be read and make them look like horrible monsters, for every parent that has fights with their kid on text message that also could make them look like terrible parents, for every parent that's ever had a hobby and has not spent 24/7 with their child. That should not be held against parents. For any parent that's ever had an affair or spent time communicating on an affair, That says nothing about how much you care about your child or your expectation of whether or not they would commit a school shooting. Most people who have affairs would still not expect their child would do this.
It was interesting, the affair being brought up into this, because I felt like, was it certainly a distraction for Jennifer Crumbley? Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
So was everything else in life. I don't know that it was necessarily playing a big part in all this, but the thing is, I mean, again, it may play a part in the frustration of the kid feeling like, you know, mom's out of control, life is out of control, we really don't have our shit together in this house, and I'm supposed to get my shit together and go and be this good person, but the people who are around me seem to really be confused as well. I mean, that's part of being a parent, is even if you don't have all your shit together, you at least try. you at least try to give the appearance of it, so the kids aren't like thinking, well, the bar's this low, I might as well live by that low bar too. That's not good parenting, of just kind of out in the open. Here's all my dirty laundry, kids. Look at me and listen to me. Kids aren't going to have respect for you if you're doing those sort of things. So I found that all a bit interesting that was brought up in this case. But I think more so to the argument of his own mental health and where this kid was and what was the recipe that made him who he is.
Well, and I think, too, bringing up the affair, I get it. It shows that her attention was elsewhere. But also, doesn't that scream that she is looking for an escape of some sort, that things are bad? Yeah. She's looking for attention and nurturing elsewhere. So, again, to me, that shines a light on what's going on in the family unit, what's going on in those four walls of that home, that they are disconnected from each other. They are looking for solutions elsewhere. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a theme to me.
No, without a doubt. I mean, it all kind of comes together into this horrible, horrible pie that was the Crumbley household, and ultimately now resulting in a guilty verdict for Jennifer Crumbley, sentencing, I believe, April 9th. Is that correct?
Yes.
April 9th, yes. Found guilty in all 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter for those 4 kids: Madison Baldwin, Tate Meyer, Justin Schilling, and Hannah St. Juliana, age 17, 16, 17, and 14, executed by her son. And for her role in not being responsible, she is paying a price for it as well. Tell us what you think in the comments on this post, wherever you may be watching or listening, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, wherever it may be. We'd like to hear your feedback on this, or on social media, as we're going to have to continue to watch this sentencing coming up, and the like I said, the repercussions of this gonna spider out like crazy, and this is going to be a precedent-setting case that will, likely be referenced many more times. And I do wonder how far back we're going to go in history now to take a look at the accountability of other parents in many other cases as well.
Yeah, it's going to be an octopus just reaching everywhere. It's absolutely groundbreaking. We're going to be hearing about this case as precedent setting for centuries.
Want to listen ad-free? Want advanced access to all of our interviews before anyone else?
Become a True Crime Today Premium Plus subscriber on Apple Podcasts.
You get every episode commercial-free,
so you can binge on true crime
until you can binge no more.
Search True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts now, or go to our podcast page and sign up now.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast next.